Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Schlage number 35-009. This is an Everest key blank in the C000 key section. So the 35009 is the part number for this key blank. And this is what the 35009 looks like. This is the back side. C000. It's the front side. Okay, it has the Everest grooving on the side, well, which is an undercut groove. In fact, there's a actually it's undercut. There's a you could see probably right from the tip of the key blank there how that feature is. So it's different than Primus in the sense that it does have what would appear to be a side bit milling, but I wouldn't say that it's side bit milling. I would say that it's an undercut groove that a pin, that its check pin can ride in. And in fact, they literally eliminate some of the material in the key blank itself so as to prevent it from being manipulated into a Primus sort of key blank. Okay, let's take a closer look at this. Now we have a variety of reference documents listed down below, and the first is called the Key Blank Reference Guide, is what it's called. And that's going to show just simply this 35009 in comparison with all of the other key blanks available from Schlage. So the 35009 is literally going to be considered the standard front for the Everest C family. C family is going to be a reference to the keyway, is what's available. The Everest can be done in restricted keyways, but this would be the open C keyway. The C keyway, or this Everest C family, is not restricted. However, it is only sold through authorized distribution channels, door and hardware distributors, locksmith shops, places like ourselves. And the purpose of that is that it's going to really just tamp down the availability of copies of the key manufactured at any, corner stand key machine place, big box store, that sort of scenario. The 35009, this is the standard front of the key blank, the embossed Schlage logo, the Everest logo that's there as well. The back is plain on this key blank, and that's typical. That is standard, I should say, not typical. And that is so that you can certainly do a really good job with stamping or engraving the backside. I obviously would not recommend that you are engraving any bidding or information that would help someone determine what the cuts were on this key. I probably wouldn't give it standard naming conventions when it comes to keying or master keying or grandmaster keying. I probably wouldn't stamp this A or AA. I wouldn't want anyone to know what level this key was or what it worked. You might use some sort of an indirect type of reference. You might put some cryptological codes on there that you have a reference document that will indicate where this key is used, that kind of thing. But the reason I mention the engraving is because it's such a generous space within which to do that in, okay? I found that key blank reference guide incredibly handy and helpful to be able to review what, a variety of different Schlage key blanks look like. I refer to it constantly is the bottom line. Now, let's take a look at the next document. So the Everest is made up of the C family of keyways, which is open, not anything restricted about it. There is also incorporated into the Everest the B, which is a restricted small format keyway. You can also do a D restricted keyway, but also a T restricted keyway. So the bottom line is, if you want the clear mechanical advantages of Everest, and we'll get to the check pin in a moment,
The fact that you're not going to get the key blank just duplicated anywhere. If the C family, a C family key blank would be appropriate for you. If you want to take all of those benefits to the next level of having it to be a restricted key blank, where there would be a handshake required, so to speak, a challenge and a confirmation, where no one can get key blanks except you upon demand. You could be able to migrate that into, like a D family keyway. So the Everest benefits are clear there. The Everest has been around since the late 1990s. It's the undercut design that makes it unique, as we demonstrated earlier. Other than the fact that there is a special pin, which is called the check pin, that will allow you to have a way to prevent non-Everest key blanks from working. It's otherwise very similar to the original classic obverse keyways. So much so that you would use almost all of your same keying equipment, certainly your pins as well. Now this check pin, we're going to get to in a moment when we get to the locksmithing information. Now in the service manual overview, we get to a page, it's actually page 6, that will allow us to review what the cylinder looks like when it's taken apart, or all of its exploded products. And in particular, it's the check pin that we're looking for. And the check pin is going to reside within the cylinder and is going to utilize that undercut groove so as to permit not only the original shear line to work, which is the cuts up here, but to draw that check pin up out of the cylinder plug itself, the cylinder housing itself, to draw it up flush for a second shear line so that the key will actually operate the cylinder plug. And it's shown there in a cross section in both the locked and unlocked position. There's that little lip that engages the outside of the cylinder housing, which will indeed prevent it from spinning even if you had a proper key inserted. Speaking of proper key inserted, this will not go into your classic cylinder constructions. This, however, let me back up. Your classic keyways will not enter an Everest 29, and your Everest will, however, go into the old cylinders, which is helpful because it will allow you to migrate that installation over time. To retract that prior statement, this is not backwards compatible into a C, like a classic C keyway. So that reference comes into play when you're dealing with a C primus. That will go into a classic C obverse, let's say, but the classic C wouldn't work in the primus at all, so I apologize for that. So moving through the rest of the manual, we see the exploded parts diagram, the parts previously referred to. As we continue to move through those documents, we get to the cut sheet, and the cut sheet is helpful because it will show, again, the key itself, the 35009, but why it's helpful is we start to talk about what is this C000. Okay, so on the second half of that page, you're going to see the tree, the tree of the keyways. And you'll notice the bottom row of 10 keyways that are there, C134 all the way through to C345. Those are simply different keyways. Think of it as C or E or F or G, etc. Now you'll notice that none of those cylinders are C000. And if you look above the cylinders, you'll see the multi-section keys and then the all-section key. So the C000 is literally an all-section key blank, and that all-section key blank is going to enter all 10 of those different keyways. The way that that's accomplished is by the fact that the blade of the key is literally milled so thin or thin enough so that it will literally pass through all of those broachings in those 10 different keyways. There is no cylinder that's C000, and there are no cylinders that are those multi-section blanks as well. So why would you want an all-section key blank? Well, I just had a call this morning where a client called and said that the locksmith told her to order the SMK by Yale, an RN 117 SMK. The reason the locksmith told her to do that is because he couldn't identify which of the 8 or so S cylinder plugs, keyways, that she had of her lock set. So the answer was, well, just order the all section. Well, that will ultimately get the job done, but it's also ultimately not best practice at all to consider such an approach, because back to what we said earlier, there is so much material that has been milled away from this key blank that it's physically smaller. As the key blank wears, as the pins wear, because you're dealing with less material, that will of course be accelerated, but then the opportunity for this to not work correctly because of the amount of slop that's in the keyway itself and this key is going to show up sooner rather than later. So it's definitely not best practice. Where you would see this sort of application is when you had an installation of locks that required different keyways. So a couple of different reasons to work within a multiplex structure, which is when you see Everest C family open keyways, think multiplex structure. That is a structure by which you've got keyways, and then you can have multi-section or all-section key blanks pass a variety of those keyways. The applications for that can be very simple, or it's all very simple, but the reasoning can be quite different. You could have, for sake of simplicity, there could be a 4-story building. You could have, a law office, a contractor's office, an architect office, floors 1, 2, and 3. You could say, let's work with the C125, C135, C145 keyways. First floor, second floor, third floor. Great. The advantage of that is as you give those tenants on those individual floors their own keys to operate their spaces, not only will their keys not work the second or third floor and vice versa, but their key won't even physically enter the cylinder. Now the manager or the owner could walk around with just the C150 multi-section blank and pass all of those locks with a single key blank, not needing to carry 3. That would be a very common reason for doing so. However, a more appropriate reason for possibly doing so is the number 4096 is going to be the number of theoretical total possible changes or key numbers that you can create in a 6-pin Schlage 2-step system. Well, what if this was a property that had 6,000 locks? You couldn't get 6,000 key changes out of a single keyway. You could then take your bidding list of your C145, photocopy that, mark it out and put C135, and now you've got 8,100 and whatever it is, 92 theoretical key changes. Let's say that you had 15,000. Let's say it was a Big Ten university and there are literally thousands of doors. You could take that concept of copying the bidding list over to the different key sections, and then chief of engineering would walk around with a multi-section or an all-section key blank. And generally what I find is that people will certainly recognize that their multi or all-section blank wears sooner, and they'd be sure to have those copies on hand or those blanks on hand so they can, cut by code an original key blank so that they can continue to safely operate those locks. But those would be the two reasons. In a very small example of why you might want a multi-section keyway is you could have your business and your home, and you could have a rental property. You could have different keyways on all 3 properties, walk around with a multi-section. You could have your home where you have 3-4 doors on your house, a detached garage. The landscaper needs to get into the garage once a week. You can give him a key on a specific keyway. The house can be on a different keyway. You walk around with a multi-section key blank where the key that operates the garage won't work the house, nor will it even enter the cylinder. So that's where that all comes from. So let's move on down to the locksmithing information part of the catalog. Now, the locksmithing part of the catalog is going to talk about tools. Obviously, a pinning kit, a punch machine, what they would call a blue punch, which is made by ProLock for punching these keyways. The jaw upgrade, if you have an existing blue punch, you'll need to upgrade the jaw, and that's, we'll talk about that more in a moment, but that's so that the jaws can grapple onto the milling of the key blank, so they really get in and hold it correctly. A cylinder plug holder for installation into a vise if you wanted to work the plug in that orientation, which is handy because they will also retain your Primus sidebar. A key gauge, that's very handy. If you had a cut key, you could determine what cuts were on the key. That pin kit is nice because you'll get the check pin and the spring that operate it. They go on to talk about the mechanics of how to go about keying the cylinder, and if you're going to be doing this type of work, you're going to want to review that. The only thing that makes it one step or a couple of steps more involved is that you've got that check pin that you have to deal with. Whether you're going to, pull that cylinder, pull the cylinder plug out of the housing with the key and the plug, the check pin won't fall out because it's held, but as soon as you take that key out, the check pin's going to come out. So you've got to be mindful that there's an extra step. You can also cut a setup key that's referred to in here, like to all nines, which will allow you to retain that check pin, etc. So those 2 pages are really helpful. Another very helpful thing for the locksmith is the depth and spacing chart that will give you your shoulder to first cut dimension, then your center to center dimensions, the size and part numbers of your bottom pins, your master pins, your driver pins, or top pins. It gives you the root depth on your cuts, and the root depth is the bottom of the blade to the bottom of the cut. Now the Schlage system here has a effective plug diameter of 0.500, and we know that because we can look at the root depth of a number 1 cut, which is 320 thousandths. We can look at the length of the pin of a 1, and that's 180 thousandths. If you add the depth of the cut from the root to the bottom, and then the length of the pin that would become flush with the shear line in the cylinder, 0.500 is what it comes to. So if you had to cut a key by code, with a code machine and a code card, you wouldn't need this. But if you had to cut a key using a machine without a card, you could certainly do so with this information as long as you had a caliper. So you'd be able to make that happen. Continuing on, talks about the upgrade of a ProLock Blue Punch, and you can see those cross sections, how the jaw changes as you need to pinch onto different sections of keys. Okay. It's nice having a punch to cut the keys because that's really a more accurate way to do so. A circular cutter is going to, if you exaggerated the concept, leave an arc in your cut. Not that that really affects proper operation, but punching the keys would be considered the proper way to do so rather than duplicating it on a rotary style cutter, even though they both will certainly work. Best as a manufacturer does not at all recommend cutting it on any tool other than their own, which is a punch. Well, of course they wouldn't, but the fact of the matter is it's there for a reason. The blue punch information is there. That's because of how a lot of people cut these. Tips for cutting the Everest and Everest 29. Everest 29 is just a different variant of all of this, which would be your S family keys, and will have an additional feature to it. The bow of the key will be slightly different. It will be differently shaped. So very handy to go through those documents. Then finally, that does bring us to all of this information. This client ordered a box of 50. This is what a box of 50 looks like. I did read somewhere that in the service manual that when Schlage creates all new master key systems, it's going to be on their Everest keyway. So the classic obverse, while that is probably the second most common keyway in the world, with likely the Quickset being the most, the migration to Everest is certainly afoot, and you will be encountering Everest as you're moving forward. Schlage needs to protect the valuable property that they have, and that's a way by which lock manufacturers do so. There's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Schlage products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog, and archival catalogs that are decades old, and a lot of encyclopedic information, service manuals, parts manuals, service manuals for their mechanical locks, etc. A tremendous amount of information is there. Any questions on the Schlage 35-009 in a C000 all section key blank or any other Schlage product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.